The story of Elagabalus, Varius Avitus Bassianus, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus goes back to the time of the Roman Republic. Ptolemy V Epiphanes married Cleopatra Syria, princess of the Seleucid Empire. This royal marriage would bring a bond between the Egyptians and the Syrians that would last through the form of a royal priesthood. Ptolemy V was a descendant of Ptolemy I, who was the companion of Alexander the Great, while Cleopatra, a Syrian, was the daughter of Antiochus the Great, who can trace her lineage back to Seleucus, also another general of Alexander the Great. This was all the way back in 200 BCE, which sets us up. And when Pompey the Great conquers the East, he will allow the priesthoods of the Eastern realms to stay in place. For example, Jerusalem, the temple to Yahweh, as well as this Syrian priesthood of Elgabal. And the reason why I bring this up is to set up the setting for Soaemis of Emesa, a member of the royal family, second-born son and child to the priest-king Septimius Severus, who ruled the Emesian kingdom from 14 until 42. He had an older brother named Gaius Julius Adzitzos, who was the first husband of the Herodian princess Drusilla, and had two sisters. Soaemis was born and raised in Emesa. His paternal grandfather was the former Emesian priest king Iamblichus II, who was installed by none other than Augustus. Soaemis married Drusilla, who was none other than the granddaughter of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and they had a son named Gaius Julius Alexion. Soaemis, during his reign, was crucial for the Roman Empire because when Titus and Vespasian came to conquer Israel, he was a key ally and aligned himself with the Romans against the Jews. This would allow the priesthood of Elgabal to survive for another century. Which brings us to Julius Bassianus. Julius Bassianus was the high priest of Elgabalus at the Temple of the Sun in Emesa, Syria, where the solar deity was worshipped in the shape of a black stone, which was said to have fallen from heaven. The name Elgabalus derives from Allah, a Semitic word for God, and Gabal, Arab word for mountain, God of the mountain. Bassianus was a member of the royal family, which I just had described, tracing its roots back to the royal families of Ptolemy, Seleucus, Mark Antony, Cleopatra, and the Romans knew that this was a real royal priesthood that existed in the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, Bassianus had a daughter named Julia Domna, who married the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus. Julia Domna was so famous and so revered by the Romans, she was deified as Augusta Soteria. In Athens, we have a Greek inscription from 211 of the Common Era. The inscription records a decree of honors granted to her by the Athenians. She is given the title Savior, implying that the decree was in gratitude for some protection accorded to Athens. The surviving sections of the text are concerned particularly with honors that identified Julia Domna with the ancient protective goddess of Athens, Athena Polias. So her full title becomes the Savior of Athens, Julia Sebaste, translated in Latin as Augusta. Here is the translation that we get from Mary Beard. of her inherent philanthropy, cooperating for all, the savior of Athens, Julia Soaemis, I propose that in all other respects it should be done as my colleague in office, Elagabalus, son of Aedes from Palin, during my absence proposed, all the annual archontes are to sacrifice to good fortune on the most holy birthday of Julia Soaemis Augusta, and to make Syria, the savior of Athens, Julia Augusta, Athena Polius, the general over the hoplites, the archon. The day of the month is to be holy, the day on which Athens dedicated the ancient temple to her. The war archon is to sacrifice to the mother of the forces on the first day of the Roman year, and these sacrifices are to be started by the priestess of Athena, and she will receive the prerequisites, and a golden statue of Julia Domna is to be set up in the Parthenon, and the general is to perform the preliminary sacrifice to good fortune in the archontes, and all the priest and the herald are to pour libations, and the priestess and the queen of the king archon are to sacrifice and to offer Asteria of the priesthood of Athena Polias, and retiring Araphori are also to sacrifice and raise the torch and dance at the festival, in order that through these events also our reverence towards the savior of Athens, Julia Soaemis, may be evident. The account of these matters shall be inscribed on a tablet and set up by the altar of the Augustoi on the Acropolis. No woman in the history of the Roman Empire has ever been granted such high deification other than the wife of Augustus himself. She was seen as Athena incarnate and a savioress, a soteria. Now, with that being said, I've just laid out to you there's a royal priesthood that's in Syria that traces its roots back to some of the most famous people in world history, according to the Romans and the Greeks. And we also have a deified woman, Julia Domna. Now, why did I tell you all this? You're looking at the title and saying, what does this have to do with Elagabalus? And when Severus died in 211, Domna became the mediator between their two sons, Caracalla and Geta, who inherited the throne. And she was the actual empress, the most powerful woman, the most powerful person, actually, in the entire Roman Empire. More powerful than Caracalla and Geta. And they were supposed to rule as joint emperors at her command, according to their father's wishes expressed in his will. However, the two young men had a discordant relationship, and Geta was murdered by Caracalla's soldiers in December of that year. Geta's name was then removed from inscriptions and his image erased as a result of the damnation memoria. So, in 217, Caracalla began a new war with Parthia, and Domna went with Caracalla as far as Antioch, Syria. There she stayed helping deal with his correspondence, while he went on to the frontier. During the campaign, Caracalla was assassinated by a Roman soldier. At this point, all of her heirs were gone, her husband was gone, so Domna chose to commit suicide after hearing about the rebellion. Her sister, Julia Mesa, was the grandmother of Elagabalus, Varius Avitus Bassianus, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus,